so I became a Christian in Singapore, of all places.
Wow.
So I was a completely poorly travelled person. We'd never really been anywhere abroad. I've been once when I was 12 to a Spanish island for a week on a package holiday. That was the only time I've been overseas. So towards the end of the academic year, as I was preparing for my A-levels, my mum comes home from work. She's by this time a lecturer at Preston Polytechnic, now the University of Central Lancashire, and she brings the bombshell home that she and some other colleagues have been seconded to a college in Singapore. And so my sister and I end up going out with her after I finished my A-levels. We end up being put with a family friend in a nice detached house that belonged to that college in the south of the island, a place called Bukit Timah. That was all great until we realised there was only 3 bedrooms. And there were 4 of us, and none of us were prepared to share, particularly not me and my sister. And so they cleared out the junk room for me, which was a perfectly nice room, but it had all the stuff that the previous tenants had left in the house, and they'd also worked for the college, so amiable exit and all the rest of it. These guys were Christians, and the one thing they didn't take out of the room were the books. And it rains quite a lot in Singapore, and I read a whole bunch of stuff you'd probably categorise as apologetics and prophecy, I suppose. Now I remember reading stuff about Daniel, and to cut a very long story short, the penny dropped with me. Oh crumbs, it's all true. And that Christianity wasn't a kind of a worldview that I could either agree with or not. It wasn't like a political party manifesto where, I like that, so I'll join. It was something that was a dynamic faith. If you'd asked me who Jesus was the day beforehand, I would not have dismissed him. I would have said he was probably a historical character, but what we know about him was so foggy and vague and lost in the depths of time. And he was a good teacher. And it was tragic he died so young. That's something like that. I wouldn't have dismissed his existence. If you'd asked me, was I a Christian? Yes. Did I have a relationship with Jesus Christ? Definitely not, for all the reasons I've just sort of set out, really. Sure. And I certainly thought that Christianity and the practicing of it was weird, unattractive, restrictive. And I knew a guy at sixth form called Jack who was the college Christian, bless him. And he was a lovely guy, lovely guy. I really liked Jack, despite the fact that he'd been a Lib Dem, a Liberal, and he joined the Labour Party. But I forgave him that, because he was a nice fella, actually, and he was a drummer in a band, but he was a Christian, a committed Christian. I remember he got photographed holding a pint of beer at a college do, and the next college magazine was a picture of him on the front cover holding a beer, and it just said his name and "It's a Sin" underneath it. So people liked Jack, but they mocked him. Yes. And I felt that the faith that he held to was weird, restrictive, unattractive.
This is quite a turnaround to be reading books in Singapore.
Yeah, I'm not I thought of myself. So my mum would describe herself. She's sadly no longer with us. She became a Christian before she passed away. Thank God. But she would call herself the nouveau poor. There's a nouveau riche, no class and loads of cash. And my mother was absolutely the opposite. So, very much the Guardian reading, liberal, the intellectual, sceptic about everything, and raised me absolutely to question everything. Yeah. And so I did not see myself as the kind of dupe who'd fall for religious nonsense, and I still don't consider myself the kind of dupe who falls for religious nonsense. But I think by the grace of God, I'm someone who knows the truth when he sees it. Yeah,
it's really interesting, because sometimes people can be a little bit down on apologetics and say, well, you can't just argue people into believing this stuff. And yet it sounds like, from your point of view, from your story, a huge part of you becoming a Christian was the more intellectual arguments, really well-reasoned, thought through, there are good reasons to believe this is true.
Yes, in part, and certainly the fulfillment of prophecy, and the fact that Daniel is clearly written when Daniel says it's written, and clearly talks about events that happened afterwards that could not have been matched up when you look at the stuff that was written regarding Isaiah, or in Isaiah, that is the address, if you like, of the Christ, undoubtedly written before that time, not possible to have made it up afterwards. I mean, we just know that from carbon dating of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That would do. I think the thing about apologetics, first of all, people become Christians because the Holy Spirit moves them to become Christians. But God uses us, and it's a great privilege, in order to help deliver that message. And I think that there's, that we, God graciously understands the place we're at. And the dangers in 2019, intellectual snobbery and pride is a real challenge. The ego shattering consequences of the gospel being true are enormous. And so God graciously gives us things that actually work with the things that we hold dear and our intellect. I just simply say that the books I read were not finger-pointing, argumentative apologetics. There is a danger that we like to, you've heard it said, you win an argument, you lose a soul.
Yeah.
My job is, and any of our jobs as Christians, if you're trying to win someone to take Jesus seriously, you're not trying to beat them in an argument. And if you do, you don't expect them to become Christians. They're going to resent you, and that's not helpful. But calmly, graciously, politely making the case for the gospel based upon the historical evidence of apologetics, the fulfillment of prophecy, it had a massive impact on me, and therefore I know it probably does with others.